you fought for it. Maybe you negotiated it in a job interview. Maybe you turned out an offer that didn't have it. And maybe you left a job to actually get it. And then you got it, and it was good for a while, and then something started to feel off. Not dramatically, slightly, slowly. You were delivering, you're doing your job, meetings were fewer, there is no commute to work whatsoever, and still something wasn't quite right. This video is about that feeling and why remote work, as most engineers may experience it, turned out to be not the thing that was actually proposed as and promised as. Let's start with an image that actually sold this whole remote thing to a generation of engineers. You know that image, right? Someone with a laptop, untethered, free, maybe a cocktail, a beach, or a cafe. Appealing, right? I actually thought about this image a lot, not because it's entirely a lie. The possibility it describes is technically real. You can sit at the beach with a laptop and type code, even answer meetings. But here's what this image actually doesn't show you. It doesn't show you that within approximately 40 minutes you mentally left the beach entirely. Because doing actual work means that you need to tune out everything around you and focus on what specifically you are doing right now. So you tuned out from everything around you, the sun, the waves, and the whole point of actually being there. And if you haven't tuned out, it means that you are absorbing everything around you, you are enjoying the sun and everything around you. It means that you're actually not working, not quite. You're pretending to work, right? Yeah, you know that. The promise of remote work was location freedom. And what engineers actually got was you can be anywhere as long as it's a quiet place, has a stable internet, and you can mentally focus on the work you're doing. So it's mentally clear space, which is, if you're honest with yourself, is just a description of a functional workspace, whether it's at home or at the office. There is also a legal dimension, and probably a boring one, that's rarely discussed. For example, if you're employed at a company and you're not a contractor, you're not a company owner, it means that your contract is almost always tied to a specific country for most of the year. So you can't just work 1 month from Lisbon, 1 month from Tokyo, London, New York, whatever, without regulating visas, tax applications, and potentially your company's compliance requirements. Yes, you may say there is a digital nomad visa. They exist, right? But they are different from country to country, so it means that you can't just obtain one digital nomad visa at any country and relocate to another one without any friction. So these possibilities exist, yes, I won't deny that, but it's not frictionless. And for most tech people, this process, right, these constraints are more complicated than that initial photo with a beach bar implies. That image was actually a best case scenario dressed up as a standard feature, as a normal, usual workflow. Actually, the location problem is the easiest one to name and find out. What's harder to notice and to talk about is what remote work actually does to people in some time, and it gets more personal. So, I've been working remotely for more than 5 years already, and for me, mostly it was perfectly fine. I'm completely content with the setup that I have, but most people I've been talking to actually experienced at least one of the following issues. So first one is blurring. Work and life happens at the same place, most of the time with the same people around you. So there is no commute from work to home to decompress, to relax. You close the laptop and you're already home, but you actually were home. The psychological separation between work and home that used to be automatic while going home from work now needs to be constructed, so you need to think about that deliberately. And most people may miss that and not do the separation deliberately. The second issue may be the loneliness, and not loneliness in an obvious way, so the lack of people, but for some of us it may happen as well. But the particular loneliness of spending most of your time, most of your day working in your head, thinking over and seeing no other things than your laptop and your kitchen, without low grade social interactions, maybe some overheard conversation at the office, maybe some comments, maybe the whole setup that you see that others do the same thing that you do. Some people don't miss that, and I'm the one among them, but many tech people struggle with it more than they expected, and it may be even hard for them to name it properly because there is nothing particular wrong with the setup. And the third thing is always on pressure. So the remote work was supposed to give us flexibility. But for some of us, it actually gave not the flexibility but availability at all time, because you're at home, so you can be available. Why not? Your laptop is right beside you, and there are some notifications, and the time between work time and not work time can become negotiable if people, for example, have not that strict boundaries with the setting. And for some organizations, this negotiation can go actually one direction to widen the working time of a particular person that don't fight for their boundaries. And here's one that I think is underestimated, especially after companies started to recalibrate after the COVID years. So imagine if a part of your team is working from office, part of is working from home. It's kind of a hybrid approach, hybrid team. The remote workers in some time tend to lose ground, and not because they are less productive or less performance or less experienced, but because there's something that doesn't appear in any performance review. So, a quick point to remember: we are social animals. We trust what we see, basically, usually. Managers are also human beings with possibly same cognitive biases. And for example, if we take two engineers that produce the same result, but one of them sits next to this particular manager, they see them every day, that engineer may be perceived as more valuable than the one that's working remotely because he is more visible, more present. And it's not a policy, it's a pattern. And I've heard from some of my colleagues that are performance driven that decided they need to still come to the office 1 or 2 days a week, and they're ready to tolerate that setting in order to be visible. Okay, you see, I'm not saying that every manager is like that, everyone is different, but the risk is real, and nobody tells you about that when they're selling that remote setup image. And this is connected to something broader, something related to post COVID. So, post 2022, the direction of job ads has shifted. At least I'm seeing that. And I've read some articles from HRs. So, for example, job descriptions that were proudly remote now quietly became more hybrid approach or even office setting. Companies that made huge commitments are walking them back. And the thing is that negotiating power that we as engineers had in 2020, 2021 has shifted. And the whole setup, the whole landscape now looks different than when people planned their remote work setup. So, as I mentioned earlier, my experience has been mostly fine, but that doesn't mean that what worked for me would work automatically for you. But it may. That's why I would like to share some tips that I use every day to preserve my mental health so that this remote setting benefits me. First thing that you need to know that I think that structure helps a lot. So I have a specific desk, that one that I'm recording at right now. I don't work, at least I try not to work from the kitchen, from the sofa, not from the bed, never. For me it's important that my working space is a particular desk, particular setup, monitor, a chair, and this physical boundary means a lot more than you may expect actually. Second one, I have specific rough working hours and I try never to violate them without any good reason to do that, because I've learned in a hard way what actually happens when you do so. Third thing, I keep notifications on my phone off during non-working hours. No need to say that I never open a laptop after work. And this rule works automatically. It's a system that I follow not inconsistently, but that just works. So my phone just doesn't show any notification after 7 p.m. and that's it. And my mind is clear. The fourth thing that may sound maybe silly, maybe small, but I try to change my clothes when I start working and when I finish my working day. And this small thing actually helps me to change this setting, to change the mood, to change the thoughts. So some kind of a physical boundary that helps me to separate these two parts of my life. And the fifth, the hardest part of the setup is not actually a setup, is something that happens after you finish your work, is reducing and eliminating the thoughts that happen in your brain after you close your laptop. So for me, actually, the physical movements help a lot. For example, I may take a stroll, I just go out, right? Or I play drums, it's also physical. And while I'm doing that systematically, consistently, maybe not every day, but still I do that, it helps me a lot to reduce the amount of noise after work, the amount of non-closed tasks or some questions that are not resolved, or maybe some conversations. It just fades away after I finish my work and do my physical activity. So try to implement something similar. Maybe go to the gym or take a stroll as well, or maybe I don't know, just clean the house. Something physical may actually separate this work part of your life and your other parts of life. And as a general rule to the life, actually, it's not a point on the remote setting, but it's more related to the life in general. It's something that's mapping to my another video I discussed. That work should be a part of your life, not your whole life. So I try to incorporate lots of things that I like, generally some hobbies, connections, anything that could make your life fuller after you complete your job. This way, this work time won't feel like the day's over, you know? So something's happening after work is also a part of your life, and when you make it fuller, you will feel much better. When that's true, when your work is a part of your whole life, your work problems remain proportional. Another core rule of my working routine is I don't do overtime. I try even not to do paid overtime. not to say that I never do non-paid overtime, because I've seen what happens to people when they do actually, and I wouldn't suggest to anyone that, especially for me. Actually, I went through a significant burnout around, I don't know, maybe 9, 10 years ago. Um, since then, my sensor towards something that's off and that can lead to such consequences is extremely low. So I sense everything right away at the start to prevent it, not to cure it. So, remote work is actually real. Flexibility is real. For most of us, it's genuinely improved our lives to spend less time commuting, to spend more time with loved ones, even just walking past each other at home. And also, for example, more autonomy on how our day is structured. I'm not arguing against that. What I'm saying is, I think that image of a laptop on a beach was selling us a narrative, an ideal picture that's actually not connected to reality most of the time, because it's never that easy, frictionless, work from anywhere picture that I've never actually seen people working like that. So the actual experience of remote work, from what I've seen, from what I've experienced for most of tech people, has been much better than the office setting for most of the parts. Harder in some ways we haven't expected it to be, and the ongoing management of your life that was never mentioned when we were sold this image. For some of us, it may be okay. For some of us, it may be extremely difficult. So it does mean that actually remote work shouldn't exist. It's not a mistake, but it means that in order for it to actually work for you, you need to pay more attention to that deliberately. You need to manage your life. You need to manage your time, your boundaries, your setup, your home, your connections with closest people not to disturb you. So it doesn't happen by default when you just enter the office at the beginning of the working day and return home then in the evening. Actually, I'm curious what's been true from what I've just described in your experience. Have you ever experienced these issues like blurring of a setup, missing connections, or maybe being not visible to your management? Share in the comments, let's discuss. Maybe you have some better tips to still preserve this remote setting but remain more healthy and content with your work. Let's discuss.